We got to start recording. Okay, go ahead.
All right, welcome to the fourth in a series of Retake zoominars focused on legislation we will be supporting in 2023. Today, we'll be discussing legislation to create a state public bank in New Mexico. I'm Paul Gibson, the co-founder of Retake Our Democracy.
And I'm Roxanne Barber. I'm the other co-founder of Retake Our Democracy. And it looks like the representative is logging on right now. So we have everybody. Great. Go ahead, Paul.
So I can go. So Retake has been supporting the creation of a public bank since the effort began in Santa Fe some years ago. Then for the last several years, there has been a statewide movement to introduce New Mexico to the inspired possibilities that could result from establishing a public bank. It has been especially challenging, however, to help New Mexico legislators grasp how a public bank differs from other investment instruments and the almost magical power of a public bank to generate investment capital and amplify the power of local community bank and state investments. With a huge state budget, we feel that a huge state budget surplus, coming this year, we feel this is the time to make an investment in diversifying our economy, strengthening our rural economies, and repairing the damage resulting from this summer's firestorms, all goals that a state public bank could make far easier to achieve. Welcome, Representative Trujillo. So we have assembled a panel of public banking advocates and legislative supporters to flesh out the issues tonight. Our panel includes the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity Executive Director, Angela Merkert, AFLEP's Public Bank Campaign Director and retired banker Harold Dixon, Helga Garcia Garza. She is the chair of the New Mexico Food and Agriculture Policy Council and the executive director of Agricultura. All right, and also a farmer herself and a member of a farming cooperative. And we're going to also have with us Representative Christine Trujillo and Senator Jeff Steinborn, who will lay out the legislative challenges and how you can help overcome them. So our panel will outline how targeted investment by a state public bank could increase food security throughout New Mexico, strengthen local communities and economies, and build resilient and diverse rural economies.
So, and I just want to, there's a little bit of a program change. We had Senator Carrie Hamblin scheduled, she couldn't make it, and Senator Jeff Steinborn stepped in very graciously. So thank you, Senator. We really appreciate that. So for the format for tonight, and this is the way our webinars usually work for those of you who have been on them before. Welcome. I see a lot of familiar names. If you haven't been on one, welcome to you. If you don't know much about Retake Our Democracy, you can go find us at retakeourdemocracy.org on the web and read about who we are and what we do. And this is one of the things we do. So for the first hour tonight, Paul and I are going to ask questions of the panelists. And then the last 25 to 30 minutes, we will open it up to attendee questions. But please do not use the chat for your questions. That becomes a little too hard to track because people tend to chat and add things, and it's hard for us to go back and find all the questions. So please use the Q&A function. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, just move your cursor down toward the bottom of the window and the Q&A icon should pop up. If you're still not seeing it, go to the more, the three dots, and you should find it there. And I want to suggest that you wait at least 30 minutes or so before you start posting questions in the Q&A, because often while we're having our conversation, your question will get answered, and you won't need to ask it. So go ahead and use the chat to make comments, but please use the Q&A for your questions.
And also just to communicate with each other. The people on the panel aren't the only experts in the Zoom room.
Yeah, we often have other experts on, so feel free to put your comments in chat. And I just want to remind the panelists that we have sort of a big panel tonight. So we're going to ask you to keep your answers to 3 minutes, maybe 4 at the very most, so that everybody has a chance to speak, and that we have time at the end for the attendees to ask questions. Thank you.
Okay, so actually this first question, we're going to actually try and keep you to 30 seconds. We like to let our panelists introduce themselves so that the people attending actually know who they're listening to. So if you could just take 30 seconds to tell us what you do and how you got involved with public banking, or why you support public banking. And let's start with Helga.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Helga Garza. I'm the executive director of the largest farming cooperative in the state of New Mexico. We're a collective of 51 farmers, small scale. Our mission is to keep our production local, feed our communities, and work on policy procurement change for the benefit of investment. So I am also the chair of the New Mexico Food and Agricultural Policy Council, and look forward to this webinar. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about you, Angela?
I'm Angela Merkert. I'm executive director of the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, and I have been engaged in this initiative for the last 8 years, first researching it and then activating a campaign for the public bank. And what brings me to this is that I'm very interested in economic justice and also democratizing our financial system for creating more equitable access to capital for the New Mexicans who want to do more and develop businesses that they haven't been able to put forward.
Okay. How about you, Harold Dixon?
Okay, well, thank you for having us here again tonight. We appreciate it. My name's Harold Dixon. I was in the banking side for about 16 years, and then went over to the credit union side for the last 24 years. I recently retired about a year ago, and I got involved in public banking really about 3 years ago, when Bob Ming and Melissa Pickett came in and kind of introduced me to it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's anytime we can keep money in New Mexico instead of having to do out-of-state lenders is just it's a win-win for everybody. So, and while there's going to be some challenges in there, I think this thing can work and work very well and really get off the ground. And I'm excited about seeing this program move forward.
Okay, thank you, Harold. And now Representative Trujillo, how about you? Got to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. I'm State Representative Christine Trujillo out of House District 25 in the middle of Albuquerque. And I'm here as mostly a passive listener, learner. And I'm interested, but I'm not quite sure what's going on. So I'm learning.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your
we'll
honesty.
help you with the learning. Senator Steinborn.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I hope can you hear me all right, first of all?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, I'm driving and across our beautiful state, heading to a legislative meeting tomorrow in Santa Fe, and so thanks for letting me zoom in. I'm Jeff Steinborn, one of your state senators from Las Cruces, and I came into this several years ago, and I learned about the public bank proposal. I volunteered to help introduce the bill, and proud to do so, and really excited about this idea of utilizing our incredible financial resources as a state, billions of dollars, to use public money to then generate more public money to be able to benefit a variety of constituents in the state, and that concept. So it's really enjoyed working with Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, to Angela and the crew, to develop a workable piece of legislation that would actually create a public instrument, a public bank of New Mexico with good governance, smart governance, good mandate, mission, and transparency and good consumer protection. So I'm happy to answer questions tonight about that bill and kind of where I see the legislative lay of the land. And very excited to still be in the fight. And really kudos to you all and to Angela for developing and everybody involved in her organization, because it's such an impressive group of people who've done so much work on this. Know that there's just an A team of people working on this. So thanks for inviting me to join you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Before we get into questions, we're actually going to show a video.
My line.
Oh,
All
sorry.
stealing my lines.
I'm stealing your
I
lines.
wanted to make a quick comment. We are going to watch a video that was produced by AFLEP because we thought it would be a good intro for a lot of you. We have probably a range of knowledge and experience in the attendees. Some people know a lot about public banking. Some people don't know much. But one of the things I want to point out, and I'm not sure if this is going to come up later, is most all of our state's money, or public funds, are now invested in Wall Street banks. And those banks are investing that money in whatever they want. And often we don't know what that is. So we really need to try to keep our money in our state so we can reinvest it to the benefit of our state. It would be a huge step forward for this state if we can get this bill passed. Okay. So bear with us just a second. We're going to share screen and we're going to run this relatively short video.
6 minutes.
Where is it?
Is that it? No.
No, that's us. Hold on a second. We're going to...
It was there a minute ago.
Whiteboard. iPad.
Oh, don't you love moments like this? The joys, it's like live television.
Just a second. We're looking for it. It's not on full screen. Here, let me try to open it. Bear with us, please. Let me close down some things here and see if we can find it. Is it back here?
Yes, it should be.
It's not there.
We're in process. There it is.
Okay. But
well, we'll make that full screen so you won't see George Crow.
We got to share.
Let's just get it full screen first and then share. I don't think we can do it. You're right.
So this has to be, sorry, everybody, bear with us for a second.
Click over here and get to share screen, and then we'll come back to this.
All right. We're trying to figure out how to get this video going here. I think we're figuring it out.
All right, let's play, let's do a movie.
Hope you can all see it. Can you see it, panelists?
Well, yes, sir.
Well, no, but it's like
yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No audio, though.
You can't hear the audio?
There we go. Not really. Yeah, coming through a little bit.
We are small scale farmers, but what we need is investment.
Let's just double check. Is everybody having trouble hearing it, or can most of you hear it?
We can hear it.
Okay, it may have something to do with the phone, that you're on the phone, Senator Steinborg. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
No, I started hearing the audio when the narration started. It's a little loud, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're good.
Just on my end. Yes, we can hear it.
All right. I wanted to make sure everybody could hear it. All right. We'll go ahead then.
I am Elga Garza. I'm the Executive Director of Agricultura Cooperative Network and our nonprofit arm, La Cosecha, Community Supported Agriculture. We are a collective of about 45 small-scale farmers using organic methods to growing food. We're in the farm training program called Grow the Growers. The farm trainees, once they've learned how to farm, went through 2 years of incubation. Now they have their farm set up. They are producing, they are selling, they are in markets.
By making sure that our farmers have a place to not only grow their food, so land to grow their food on, but then a place to bring their food to, and then opportunity to distribute the food.
In our production, on the average, we can move about 4,000 pounds a week of New Mexico grown fruits and vegetables. And how do we do that? Through community-driven markets.
I would like to walk you from the very beginning of the kitchen so that you kind of get the feel of how we receive the vegetables and then what we do from there. We are getting together salad. Receiving the food and then distributing it back out again is.
I just want to explain to our attendees that the reason we're sharing this is that, and we'll get to it pretty quickly in this video, is to show you the kinds of things that a public bank could actually fund to help them expand their operations. But we want you to see the richness of the operations first.
Yeah.
So.
And the connection to public banking.
Vital to our organization. And it really has helped us to be able to sell to our senior centers and our hospitals and our schools and our early childhood education. As small businesses, as small cooperatives, we know that when we buy locally or support other local businesses, that the multiplier effect takes place, and those local businesses in return support more local businesses.
We have a lot of landless farmers. That's why this program is also very important. They didn't inherit land. They don't have the financial backing to buy land. So how do we invest for the farmers to continue to farm?
We use a grassroots bottoms-up approach to solving our own community's problems, because it's not about not understanding, it's about not having resources. And as a New Mexican whose family has been here since time immemorial, I know that New Mexicans lack the ability to create generational wealth because we have not had the opportunities and the access. And we know that what we're doing is going to be able to take our farmers to that next level.
Even established farms, it is still not easy for them to get financing to continue to grow. They need hoop houses to be able to grow year round. They need pumps. They need vehicles to move their produce. And for many of our farmers, they have tried the conventional banking, and because they don't have the capital and the equity that most traditional banking systems require. So what we need is financing that understands our mission of real community investment on so many different levels, and to keep all of that system local, secured within New Mexico. That's community saying, we will invest. We're building job security in agriculture, and it is building that economy now where we are competing with Costco and Cisco, those other markets that has been taking money out of the state and only makes a corporation richer, not the people. When agricultural land here in the South Valley is up for sale, they become Walmarts and they become parking lots. So this is a way to purchase that land so that it continues to build producers of sustainable agricultural practices and our local food source within Bernalillo County. Public lending is very important because it's keeping money and economic growth in the state of New Mexico. What we need is different types of investment through state institutions, economic development departments, and lending sources for small-scale farmers that are coming together collectively and have made effective change within our food system here in New Mexico.
Okay, I think that gives you an idea, at least for the rural. And you know, while that was focused on farms and ranchers and rural, the same concept goes for many small businesses, as we'll talk about today.
Fleet farming basically means growing food with your community.
Hold on 1 second.
There are so many lawns in America. As you're driving around your city, you can.
We were moving on to the next video. Apparently. Sorry about that.
So my first question is for you, Angela, and please try and keep this to 3 minutes because we're going to go into greater depth on much of what you're going to be introducing. So the question is, with such a brilliant articulation of what a state public bank could do, as we found in that video, and after 8 years of advocacy to establish a public bank in New Mexico, what questions or concerns are preventing the legislature from advancing a state public bank? And if you could just give us, you know, tick off a few of them, and then I think we're going to wind up talking to Harold and some others to kind of expand on that. You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. First off, it's new and it's different. And so a significant education process has been needed to help legislators understand how the bank is different from annual appropriations from a revolving fund. And then there have been concerns from the New Mexico community bankers about potential competition with, they think that the public bank will make for them, which you'll hear about is not accurate. And then also the community bankers are saying that they are already lending to the borrowers and that they have money that isn't being loaned because they don't have the borrowers coming to them. And especially related to small business and rural communities. And another factor that comes up is that economic development and the department staff have been kind of sending a mixed message that they say that they're adequately funding economic development projects and community development at the same time that they are annually requesting increased appropriations. And I think all of those factors contribute to the issues that we're dealing with right now.
Okay, so those are the things that the legislators bring up. Harold, can you try and dispel some of those things?
Sure, absolutely. You know, so Angela talked about the competition, and that's one subject that continues to come up. There is no competition with the public bank against your own bank or credit union. So the whole purpose of the public bank is to supplement what you already do. And so you know, we're not loaning directly to the customer. It's all supplemented through the bank, and then, you know, they would involve the public bank in order. And here's why. People say, why do you need it? A lot of times there's collateral or that kind of thing that just doesn't fit in the box of a bank or a credit union. And so this gives us a chance to, you know, they have good cash flows. It's a viable business, but yet not enough to be comfortable with on the banking balance sheet. So the competition thing, absolutely no competition from the bank. We're just there to supplement. So there's no competition at all.
In fact, isn't it the case, Harold, that you would be basically taking your cues from community banks who would come to you and say, hey, this is a good business, but we can't make a loan?
Right. And more than likely, it's usually a collateral issue of why. And so, as long as the cash flow is good and that kind of thing, there's certainly viable businesses. They just don't fit in the box. And so typically New Mexico does a lot of real estate lending, some oil and gas, but, they don't, and I'm not speaking for all of them. There are some that, don't get creative outside of that sometimes. And so we need to open up the doors to allow more banks to come in. And if they're saying there's enough demand already, I mean, we know from recent data that New Mexico average banks are loaned out about 57%. So in the banking world, that's low. If, ideally, you'd want to be somewhere between 75 and 80% optimal. I mean, here's my theory: is that you're taking deposits from your members, and you're not loaning them out to your members. You're either having to invest that money in something else. Why not invest it in New Mexico? And so that's the reason we think there's a need and a demand for a public bank to help the banks do that.
So what about the EDD? They say that they're meeting the needs.
And I'll tell you, EDD does a great job.
And wait, what is EDD? Let's avoid the acronyms.
Economic Development Department.
Okay, thanks.
So they do a great job. Their typical focus has really been on bringing out-of-state businesses to New Mexico to create jobs, which is great. But they haven't really been focused on doing anything for local businesses that are here that are perhaps smaller. So while they're helping create jobs, and that's all about economic development, that's wonderful. But I think, and to be fair, they do have some plans to increase that type of lending where they will do more local small business lending. But at this point, that hasn't existed, and so we're not going to compete with Economic Development Department. I think we should be able. There's room for both of us, and a way to supplement that, where I think there's plenty of room to do what they do best, which is bringing in jobs and people that are going to create business in New Mexico. That's great, but I think there's a need for your local bank to support local business. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it would be a whole lending community that would collaborate with each other and strengthen the whole would be larger than the individual parts. Is that a way to capture it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's there is a demand out there. I think, and in all fairness, banks and credit unions are heavily regulated. They're under a lot of scrutiny. So I think this takes some of that heat off of them in order to be able to open up and do some lending in there. And you have the backing of the public bank to either guarantee or perhaps supplement on the back end of that loan, where the bank is still well collateralized, and it takes the risk away.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind people that for our attendees, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and that icon is down at the bottom of your screen. We're going to go to Helga now, who starred in the little film that we just saw, which was very interesting. So can you tell us, Helga, a little bit more about the experience that small farmers that have had in trying to secure the capital they need, and how a public bank, would remedy that?
Well, when I talk about small scale farmers, I'm talking about farmers that 1/4 of an acre, which is basically a hoop house. Largest farmers that we have, our average farmers are 3 acres to 5 acres. We do have 4 farms that are up to 8 to 20 acres. So when we look at agriculture within the state, so many people think of the big ag business that you find in the pecan growers or the wine, the grape vineyards, or even the chili growers down south. But those are large scale farms that export the majority of their product. So when we're talking about small scale farmers, I think there's a misunderstanding. And right now that I heard about
did she freeze?
Yeah. We're not hearing you right now, Helga. Maybe you're having a little bit of a connectivity problem.
Could the public bank invest in broadband?
Helga, if you can hear me, maybe if you turn your video off, sometimes that helps, and then we can still hear you speaking, because the video takes up a lot of bandwidth.
I don't think she can hear us.
Yeah.
So maybe we should go to Sarah Manning.
Oh, she dropped off. Okay. Well, or we can go back to that question when she gets back on. We can try that. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the rural community not being able to get loans. And Sarah Manning is the outreach worker for AFLEP. We could elevate her to a panelist and she could speak to that.
All right.
For a while.
And then let's just, if Helga gets back on, we will let her, she might be being on.
Hey, Paul, this is Senator Steinberg. Can I say another word about what the public bank would do that hasn't been touched on yet?
Sure.
Okay. And I think Harold and Angela have done a good job starting to explain the bank, but it goes beyond just economic development lending. And first of all, I want to just say something that people may assume, which is that this public bank will not have branches. It's not like a traditional bank that will have branches across the state. It's really, think of it as kind of products that will be offered, kind of like the New Mexico Finance Authority. They'll have headquarters, I'm sure, in Santa Fe, like other parts of state government, but their financial products that, as Harold was saying, would be available for local banks to help certain types of industries or companies. But it goes beyond just that. The law itself, at least the bill that we have right now, would serve to support public purposes and public causes, I guess you could say, from public infrastructure. It could be roads and bridges and things that state does for local governments, but it can also be to support organizations that provide food security or broadband or all kinds of public purposes. And that's such an important difference from a traditional bank that's looking at one thing, profit and business. We get to use public money to stimulate community benefit and use these profits that are being generated by public banking into then public purposes. And in North Dakota, they use their public bank, for example, to help with flood damage.
Right.
Angela's going to speak.
So you get to generate revenue. Okay, good. I just wanted folks to know about that as well.
Yeah, just tonight we decided to focus a little bit on the farming community and issues around that, but we are going to bring up some of the other purposes of a public bank. But thank you for mentioning some of those, because it's good for people to understand that. Okay, Helga, do you want to get started again? Yeah, we lost you. And I guess if you're having trouble again, you can try turning off your video and just speaking, because sometimes that takes up less bandwidth. But right now you look fine.
Okay, I don't know what happened either, but I'm glad I was able to plug back in.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to really understand the difference between different concepts of farming and providing food security. Our collective of farmers, that's been our path and our mission since we started in 2008. And when we talk about, we're 51 farms throughout the state. We're both urban and rural farmers using traditional ancestral methods to growing food, being sustainable and regenerative within our soil health, retention of water, all of those pieces that are so crucial. Our 51 farms employ over 180 people. In our aggregation, we employ about 20 people. So we are creating jobs, and we're an important piece to that survival of food security. And I think that is a very, very important piece to how does community benefit. You know, we can't just put a price on what is your capital like, what is your equity like, when we are mission driven to provide a very crucial part on how we can feed our own state. So during COVID, we saw the scarcity and all of those pieces that came in when we rely on a global food system. And in building our farm to market system and our production in New Mexico grown fruits and vegetables, which ranching is becoming a big part of that. And also on how we develop it to the next step of value added production. That in itself takes a lot of seed money. And who do we go to? We have had to figure out all of those pieces on our own because we don't fit the banking systems that are where we can go and try to apply for this type of funding. So for us, I think it's very important that we continue to try to find ways of how do we become a state that can feed ourselves, that has all of that capacity to do that when our farmers are struggling to purchase seed, when our farmers are struggling to purchase equipment, when our farmers are struggling to purchase a vehicle adequate enough to move their produce throughout the state. And that includes our cooperative as well. We talk about the individual farmer's need, but then we have the food hub capacity that we need to keep building as we ask for more legislative support within institutional buy-in and investment within our local food system.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
The next question is for Angela, because we want to look at another possible benefit from the public bank. I read some years ago when a huge flood devastated parts of Minnesota and North Dakota, the Bank of North Dakota stepped in with a relief package that enabled North Dakota to fully rebuild and recover in months, while years later, parts of Minnesota remained damaged and dysfunctional, non-functional. Do you see a role for the state public bank in New Mexico in repairing the damage caused by the summer firestorms and subsequent floods? And of course, those aren't going to be the only ones we ever encounter. Angela?
Exactly, Paul. It's a great question. And yes, the Bank of North Dakota did come through, and their side of the river was redeveloped within just a couple of years. It took a number of years for Minnesota to repair the damages in the neighboring community across the river. And I think that it tells us about what we can do when we keep New Mexico revenue safe, local, and working for New Mexicans. It means that in the follow-up from the fire damage, as well as the flooding in northern New Mexico and also around Silver City, there's a space there for what I call the Tier 3 funding. The initial funding comes in from FEMA. It's just the immediate response. And then there's a kind of secondary level of funding that comes in. It's emergency funding from the state as well as the feds And then there's what I call the level 3, where it has to expand and more investments need to be made. And that's where the bank could be up and running for northern New Mexico by the time that they're at that level 3 funding, because small businesses are going to be redeveloped. Those smaller farming operations will be further developing, and it will take that longer term commitment to stabilize and help those communities thrive again. And there's definitely a place for a state public bank to support that kind of emergency funding and lending support in those kinds of programs for the follow-up from other climate change issues as well. What we can do with wastewater upgrade of equipment, fresh water, air quality, all of those areas can be addressed with funding that can come in part from the state public bank. So there's a place for infrastructure as well as the small business development and rural development.
So specifically in relation to the flood in North Dakota, what I read was that it was that 1 year, I think it was 2008 or 2009, they had the floods. And then every other year since, the Bank of North Dakota has stepped forward, and they are the lead on relief. One of the things that I read was that very often even FEMA can take a while to get the cash out to those. And so the Bank of North Dakota just said, here's the money, and we'll recoup it from FEMA. And so people, instead of having to wait on a federal bureaucracy, got what they needed right away. And we've got a video on that we'll be putting into a blog. The Bank of North Dakota put together a video on how they've done that. So
yeah, they've done, those are called kind of bridge loans, and they will, they're definitely, they definitely do support that 2 to 3 year leg that can be there with the FEMA funds. I recently heard the chair of the Bank of North Dakota Advisory Board, who's a former community bank president, saying that they have such a strong community bank network in North Dakota because of what the Bank of North Dakota has developed with them in terms of giving that kind of support for fires as well as for the flooding in the state. They just got a strong, I think of it, imagine it as a strong flow through. When there's a crisis, they're there to respond.
If only our community banks could get the message and see that this could be a great boon to them.
Well, and I know that after the crash in 2008, North Dakota was the least affected state in the country because of the help of the public bank there. And it is the only state, for those of you who may not know, that currently has a state public bank. Thank you, Angela. We're going to go to you now, Senator Steinborn. Can you tell us specifically what legislation is going to be introduced in the 2023 session? And do you anticipate challenges to that? And if so, what are those? Why are other senators reluctant? And what can advocates do to help pass that bill?
Yeah. So as far as what legislatively will be introduced in the coming session, we're obviously watching. We have an election coming up in a few weeks that is going to change the landscape, or may change the landscape, that we'll obviously need to pay attention to. Also, there's still, the legislation hasn't passed. It is a significant, big idea. It's really, in legislative terms, only, people have taken a shot at this sporadically over like 15 years, but as far as serious legislative efforts, really just the last couple of years when we introduced it. So it's still evolving, and significant legislation does evolve, and there's big stakeholders being consulted on this legislation, like the New Mexico Finance Authority, which does a lot of traditional lending. Of course, you have the community bank. So I expect that big conversations are going to keep happening with those stakeholders, and we are, you know, having conversations amongst ourselves. I know Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity and their network. And so, you know, with the hopes that in the 2023 session, we will be introducing legislation again to create a public bank. I think the timing is very good for it because New Mexico does have a significant budget surplus, and this does involve setting aside $100 million of our receipts. Now, granted, I want to point out this is not new money. This is existing deposits we have as a state, but the timing is good for us to do this, and it definitely fits in our economic diversification strategy. So it'd be a missed opportunity, I think, if we don't introduce the bill again this session.
Okay, and so what do you think? I mean, I know it's going to depend on the election to some degree, but are the prospects better than in the past? They better be.
Well, I mean, you know, if we have the same team on the field, I would say yes, because I think we have a governor and we have legislators and legislative majorities in the House and the Senate that, generally speaking, are predisposed to be open to these kinds of concepts. But so yeah, I mean, generally we're moving in the right direction, and I am optimistic. But we also need to be clear about what challenges are legislatively, which is we have this industry that's decided that this is a threat, the bankers. And literally, when I put on this bill with Angela and others, literally you end up with local bankers from all the committees, all the members that are on that committee saying, this is going to hurt our local community, and we're supporting all these, and making legislators feel like they have to choose between this bill or their local community almost. And so that's pretty tough for a legislator, and so we have to overcome that. And so yeah, no, I mean, it's challenging, and the margin is pretty slim, the margin of what we have to accomplish to be successful at this moment. But yeah, even then, that happens all the time in the legislature, and we win very important, huge battles on social issues and other economic issues, sometimes along slim margins. And then, of course, within a few years, everybody says they love it. And we saw that with transparency and webcasting. You know, so you create a paradigm shift, and this is definitely a paradigm shift in a way, but and I think something that would be very popular once it's successful. But we have a battle to get it done. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Senator.
Yeah.
So we
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Christine is on, she's on the phone, and because she was having issues with Zoom, but she may have come in off of another link. So she is available for questions.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see if we can, do you know what her number is? I don't see her name on here, but let me just go down and see if I can find her by name. If not, you might have to tell me.
By phone number.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be, I've got two phone numbers at the top. One ends in 4544, one ends in 8676. Is she one of those? Do you know?
I need to check.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, everybody. In 5 to 10 minutes at the most, we're going to get to the attendee questions. But we just have, if we can get Representative Trujillo back, we have a question for her, and then we're going to be closing and going to the attendee Q&A.
Let me just add though that the credit unions, which are local banks, they support the public bank, and that's a huge supporting factor that is really helpful to be at these committee hearings, to have other local banks essentially say, hey, we like this, we think this will help us, and to kind of set the record straight on how this supports local banks and isn't in competition to them. So that's a really positive thing from essentially local bankers in support of a public bank.
Yeah.
Just point that out.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, Sarah Manning, who's part of AFLIP, had her hand up, so I'm going to let her speak. So go ahead.
She's one of the outreach workers.
Right. So go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. It's the reason why the Bank of North Dakota has been able to be so effective in times of emergencies is because they have spent decades creating relationships with local banks, with community banks, so that when there is a crisis in a particular area, the public bank can simply make a deposit from their bank into the local bank, and then the local bank has extra cash, which it needs to be able to fund the loans. And they can do that electronically, within hours of a major crisis. And so that is one of the reasons why the Bank of North Dakota can respond so quickly. They describe themselves as agile. And that's really one of the reasons why we want a public bank in New Mexico. I also just want to say Helga is one of the best experts I've ever heard on farming and its issues, and I'm thrilled that she is with us. I had the opportunity to speak with the owner of a large Albuquerque restaurant, family owned. It's been around for decades, and they get most of their fresh vegetables from small farmers in the Albuquerque area. And the problem with farming is that your income is focused only in one section of the year, but your expenses are all year round. And traditionally, farmers have sold their crops all at once. But the bankers are really leery with lending to farmers because who knows, you get locusts, well, you don't have a crop. You have bad weather, you don't have a crop. Yet to be effective, as Helga said, farmers need investments, and for especially for things like farmers markets that we all love so much. Many farmers would really benefit if there were mutual, either through a co-op system or another system, cold storage facilities. Because when something is ripe, you need to pick it and it needs to be in the storage before you can get it to market. And that would help a lot. And that's the kind of, if you're a small farmer, as Helga said, less than five acres that you're farming, you may not own that land, so you do not have collateral to be able to go to a bank and get a loan on it. And this is something that we would like very much to change. New Mexico has people coming in from across the country to have our food, to be tourists here. We need to support the agriculture that makes our great food possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sarah. And we have Representative Trujillo back. Welcome back. Glad you could get on again. We do have a question for you. So if you want to go ahead and unmute, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. I was listening on my phone, but I could not access your faces.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to get back on.
Okay. So our question is, can you address basically what Jeff just addressed in terms of the Senate, but talking about the House? The House is going to definitely be different with Speaker Egolf no longer there, and probably Javier Martinez as the Speaker. Right. Is that going to be any easier for getting this through?
I think that wasn't Representative Roybal Caballero your House sponsor, Senator? Because I think she got it through 2 committees, but it didn't get on the floor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she right. was the sponsor. She was the sponsor in the House and is the sponsor in the House. And it did go through 1 committee and then was not funded in the budget. So it was tabled in the House Appropriations Committee, where they standardly, as you know, because you and I serve in the House Appropriations Committee, right. they table everything unless there's money in the budget. And for what it's worth, Javier Martinez, if he is the Speaker, voted for this bill in committee.
Right. I think we would have, or you all would have better luck. I can sign on as to help move it forward, but I think you have to already have had the legislation, which I haven't seen for this year, and the request already going through, and where would it be funded through what agency? Do you know?
That's for you, Angela.
Probably, hold on. Probably it could be economic development or one of a couple of other departments also.
See, what if they haven't already presented to Legislative Finance Committee, and usually we start doing that in late October and all of November. Whomever is carrying the bill is gonna have to request that a line item be created just for that amount and have the money, the actual amount put in there, and then work like heck to try to get the funding, because LFC will not, as you know, represent Senator Steinborn, if it isn't in the budget, so to speak, they're not going to fund it. You know, Patty will say not just no, but hell no. And the reality is, even if you can get someone to put it in their budget as a line item request, and when they present to the governor, you know, the agencies present to the governor and they present to LFC, if it's in there, you should have better luck of passing it, because they're doing that to all my bills.
Yeah, thank you. And just for a clarification, when she says Patty, she's talking about Representative Patty Lundstrom, who is chair of the House Appropriations and Finance Committee, and she's a tough one. So yeah, if your money isn't, if you're not in the budget, she won't even consider it. It just, like I think Senator Steinberg said, that the bill will just be tabled and it's over. So there's a lot of legwork, as everybody on this call knows, and as AFLIP knows, years of legwork to get.
We're expecting to have a very busy November.
Yeah.
Once the election is over and we see the signals from the outcome, we expect to have a very intense November.
Well, just to ask for clarification, then, have the two sponsoring legislators connected with the economic development committees to get that
yes,
request for money in there, so it's in the line item budget?
What we've connected with economic development, and also we're talking with NMFA, because that's been another area where Marquita says she can always use more appropriations, but the question is, with her, is where is the bank situated? And so there are discussions going on about that too.
So
well, my advice is work fast, because it's going to be going at warp speed for the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Representative Trujillo.
Thank you. I think we have one final question for Angela, and then we're going to get to attendees Q&A. We have about, I don't know, 10 questions there. So tell us, Angela, how can the people on this Zoom tonight, where can they find more information on the public banking effort, and how can they help support the initiative?
Thanks for making time to share that. We have a website at aflep.org, aflep.org, and you can go to the website and see updates on what we're doing, and also subscribe to our newsletters and e-blasts. And you can also send us questions or comments through info@aflep.org, and we'll be able to respond to you and be connected to you. And, you know, that's where you'll hear about our different outreach, our different calls to action, even making financial contributions. But all of that is centered on the website.
And that's just to make it very clear, aflep.org. Right?
.org.
Not AFLEC, like the insurance company.
Correct.
Right? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I hope all our panelists can stay on, because we're going to go to the attendee Q&A right now. And sometimes they're general questions, but often they are specific to one panelist or another. And panelists, if you want to click on that and look through them, We're going to try to get through all of them. We have about 25 minutes to do that. And I apologize if we don't get to all of them. I'm going to start at the top, the first one that came in. And if we see something that we feel has already been answered in the discussion, then we may wind up skipping that. Okay.
Matt. The first two are just about.
Yeah, okay, they're just a couple of technical comments. Okay, this is from Matt Dodson, and he's asking, will this bill have in it giving priority lending to employee-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses and co-ops by way of lower interest rates, etc.? Don't know who wants to answer that.
Harold, do you want to go with that?
Sure, let me just grab that up here. So, you know, obviously we're there to help everyone. If we have small business owners, minorities, obviously we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to borrow money, and sometimes that capital is not always available. And so certainly it's an open door to allow that kind of lending to happen for sure.
Okay, but not necessarily a priority with employee-owned business or co-ops or minority-owned businesses.
Yeah, I don't know that it's. I think as we iron out all the details in this, I think that's something that I would probably see as a priority. Again, as long as they are viable businesses that can, you know, they create jobs, they. You know, as Hilda talked about in the farming, but you know, you may have a bad year and there's no rain, there's a hailstorm that comes in right when the crop's coming in, and you know, you're stuck for another year. And so, you know, I think we need to kind of support those types of businesses, and how can we be supportive and continue to help them be a better business operator too.
Okay, thank you. Matt, we're going to skip your next question. We'll come back to you if we can, because we want to give other people a chance to have their questions answered, since you had two in a row there. So this question is from Ona Porter. She's asking if, Angela, if you can speak to the impact of a public bank on student loans in North Dakota.
Yes, I can. Bank of North Dakota was early on with creating very low interest student loans for high school graduates who are going to stay in the state. And they also have excused some of those loans following the Great Recession. They've recently, in the last year, moved those loans out of the bank into an ancillary kind of financial office or institution. So they're off of the Bank of North Dakota books, but they are still supporting and advocating for that kind of lending to go on. And they were early on with making those kinds of low interest loans available. So, you know, the great benefit is that they are not paying, those loans are not being moved to high interest private groups who are, you know, essentially doing usury, we think, with those loan programs. They're keeping them consistent at the low interest and not selling them off.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. We have kind of a long question here. Do you want to read it, Paul?
Sure.
From an anonymous attendee.
Anonymous. Mr. Attendee or Ms. Attendee asks, most of the financing opportunities you're talking about are already being done by the NMFA, that's the New Mexico Finance Authority. Wouldn't it be easier to revamp the NMFA by adding more programs like for small farmers or climate change, and instead of bonding out their loans, keep the proceeds at the NMFA?
Who wants to take a stab at
Harold, is that something?
Harold or the Cindy?
I'm gonna jump in with Angela on that one a little bit. Angela, if you want to start, and then I.
Sure. Well, first off, the NMFA is doing some fantastic work it's increased its number of programs and staffing support immensely especially the last couple of years, due to the federal income coming in for pandemic related funds, but it's not a bank. So it, just like it was doing today with the oversight committee, was reviewing the increased appropriations that it's requesting, but it doesn't create money like the bank does. If they ask for 50 million, they have 50 million to lend out, and that's what they bond out then. If we had 50 million with the bank, we could expand that, and we can develop credit 8 to 10 times that amount without making the actual appropriation of 400 million. We can have the 50 million and increase the lending capacity. So that's the significant difference, and NMFA will never be able to do that without a bank stipulation there. I'll let Harold explain more of that.
Well, just the way, Angela, great answer. Just the way the NMFA and the bank are structured, like she said, it's a funding mechanism. They get allocations once a year, every other year. Here's how much you have, and when it's out is out. And with a bank, more deposits create more loans, and so that allows us to capitalize on, we're going to consider a well-capitalized bank for the public bank, maybe at 10%. So that gives us the lending opportunity to loan out more than just the 50 million, but really you're $500 million, 500 million on there with, if we can capitalize that up. And so there are more opportunities, we think, in the public bank to do that than just a funding mechanism through someone who has to come up every year and ask for grants and money to come in.
Okay.
I think at some point we really need to have a very good description of, because I heard Helen Brown give one in Santa Fe of how, you put $100,000 in a bank and it can lend $1 million on that. And so it's like 10 times the amount of money. It's like making money, just creating it. And that's what banks do. They create money and with the flick of a computer.
And Helen Brown is...
she's the head of the
National Banking Institute. Is that what it is, Angela?
Public Banking Institute, yes.
Okay, all right. Great, we're gonna go to the next question. This is from Sharon Argenbright. Could public bank loans replace the bonds that we're all voting yes or no on right now? Those kinds of bonds? Whoever thinks they know the answer, go ahead. Go ahead, Harold.
Certainly they could. I mean, that could be certainly a line of business that the bank could do, but we don't loan to the entity straight. They'd have to go through a public bank. I mean, through the bank, the regular bank or credit union, and then someone bring that to us. So those bonds and that kind of thing are a little different animals. So it's something that could be done, but probably not initially, is what we wouldn't be looking at that.
Okay, but you could move into that at a later time once the bank is established.
Right. The National Infrastructure Bank could address more of those larger projects if that would pass at the federal level, but that wouldn't be where we would start in the state. Although we could start with some of the areas like the solar panels and help with alternative energy installations, some of that kind of project.
Although just to add to go into the weeds a little deeper, the bill does allow for the public bank to fund public infrastructure.
Yes.
So certainly a local government that could choose to seek a loan from the public bank for public infrastructure, and rather than use their bonding capacity for that then piece of infrastructure, have that available to fund something else. So, I mean, it could happen. And the legislation as written right now could allow that to happen. Yep. But as Harold says, you know, starting off with that initial corpus of money, that might not be something you would see right off the bat, but it could happen.
Definitely possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. Why don't for-profit banks support this bill and credit unions do support it?
That's a great question, because it, you know, in my mind, anything that supports New Mexico and brings dollars into the state and is another avenue to provide capital to a borrower, why would you be against that? I guess is my, you know, sometimes I shake my head at that, because it just doesn't make sense to me why they're not supporting it. You know, I think it's that fear of competition. And again, there is no competition in there. You're still doing the loan through your local bank or your credit union. And so you are, you know, you're certainly supporting, you know, it's coming through you. You're ultimately making the decision on that. So there's no reason a bank wouldn't do that. Now, I will tell you that Angela and I have met with other bankers, and typically when we meet with them one-on-one, they like the idea, but they won't say it publicly.
Okay.
And I think, isn't that the case, that it's mostly the Wall Street bankers that really kind of dominate the community banking lobby and provide their messages, and, you know, are saying you need to really oppose this, because Wall Street doesn't want to see another state bank succeed.
And that could very well be. Yeah.
Well,
and
the other area, though, I think, is that they're not, they don't see the competition up front, but what they see is the potential that once the public bank was mature, would that be a go-to that the cities and counties wanted to use as a depository for their revenues, and not keep them only in the community banks of their respective areas, their respective cities and counties. And that's what we seem to have tapped into. It's what could happen downstream, because everything else that they've raised is misinformation. It's just not accurate about the way that the bank has been structured, and the legislation is very clear. As we've proposed it in the past, at least, it's been very clear with the expectations there about non-competition.
Mm-hmm. Well, and those banks have a lot of money, so I'm sure they've got high-paid lobbyists to fight.
The bank lobby is one of the top lobbyist groups in the state.
Yeah. Okay. And so we have more questions from Matt Dodson, but Matt, again, since we've already answered one, I think we can go back to yours, but I'm going to move ahead, and then we'll go back to your questions. And this question is from Stephanie Levy. She's asking, how does the process work? A farm goes to their bank or credit union and asks for a loan but has no collateral. The bank goes to the public bank, which funds the bank or credit union. How does the interest work? Does the bank take a cut and the public bank gets some interest? And does this make the loan economical for the farmer?
Good question. So yes, the farm would go to their local bank or credit union, ask for the loan. They're gonna say that doesn't fit in our box of how lending goes, and so that's where they would hopefully then say, you know, let's we can't do it here without some backing, but you've got a viable business. You've been doing this for X number of years. You obviously know what you're doing. But from a collateral standpoint, it doesn't quite fit. And so whether that's equipment or cash flow, and not so much cash flow, more equipment or collateral, if they don't own particularly if they don't own the farm, And so that's where, you know, the bank would then share with the public bank. And so maybe in this particular case, the public bank does a 75–80% guarantee to the bank and say, okay, anything goes wrong with this, you've got an 80% guarantee on it, we're good to go. Or perhaps you, in this case, they didn't own the collateral. You know, in a collateral standpoint, we would say, okay, you do a 50% loan, very little risk in doing a 50% loan, and then the public bank can come behind that and do, let's say, a 40% loan. So it's a 90% loan, hoping that we can get the you know, the borrower put in 10%, which is similar to what the Small Business Administration does on their 504 program, and that's just what they call it, where you split out the risk in there among the bank, the public bank, and the borrower.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
I hope so. Yeah, again, we'll go back to your questions, Matt. He has a lot of questions. Maybe we should just put him in touch with you directly, Harold and Angela. This one's from Maria Spray. She's asking, and this is interesting, are there enough community banks in the rural areas to even make the public banking viable to folks there? It seems to me that some rural areas only have big banks like a Wells Fargo.
You know, I think there is, and I don't know, I know the Wells Fargo is big in a lot of small communities, but I think there's enough banking outlets that certainly that could, you know, that they can typically reach beyond just the community they're in and go out to other communities. So I think that there would be enough demand and support to certainly get plenty of loans out there.
So it wouldn't have to be a bank that's really close to them necessarily.
Not always, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Wait a minute, I just lost it. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll come back to you when you remember. Here's a question from Jeff Selesky. Approximately how much money might reasonably or potentially be retained for use exclusively for New Mexico if a public bank was established in our state?
Well, really, all of it. You know, our goal is to loan New Mexicans money from state funds, and so you're saying how much money? I mean, we think the first year out we can do probably $35 million in between guarantees, well, and even just participation type loans and doing loan guarantees with that. So I think if we could do 35 million the first year, get it off the ground, here's what I think is going to happen. Someone mentioned earlier, I think once you get started and people go, that deal works pretty good, then I think other places are going to join in. So it's a new concept. It's different. I get it, but you know, we've got to do something different in New Mexico to change the thinking. And how do we get more entrepreneurs and people hiring, and you know, jobs create paychecks, and paychecks create more deposits, and deposits create loans. And so how do you get that momentum going? And this is a great place to start.
So I remember my question, and it was actually reflected in somebody else's question up above, but we didn't ask it. And that is, why do we need to go through any kind of private bank to do this? In other words, why couldn't the public bank make loans directly to counties that wanted to do something, or to business county owners, collaborations, public-private partnerships? Is it basically politics? Just basically you don't want to be competing with the community bank?
Yeah, I think that was really the whole idea behind it, that we would not be competing with your local bank. And so we want you to initiate that loan, Mr. Community Bank or Credit Union, and then you know, if you need support behind it, then we will certainly do that. But it was not, you know, it was never intended to compete. And so, and that's been the biggest hurdle trying to get through with the community banks.
Okay, here's a question from Elaine Sullivan. Elaine is part of AFLEP as well. What benefits of the public bank do our panelists believe will be the most compelling for legislators and their constituents? Is that something that we want to ask the senator to answer? What are the most compelling benefits that are going to convince all those senators and House members?
Yep. Well, I think when you talk about economic benefits, when you talk about helping meet the community needs that this bank will do that a traditional bank doesn't, it checks a lot of boxes that a lot of legislators care about. You know, some legislators, unfortunately, though, take their cue from industry and corporate America, and that's, you know, tends to trump all those other collective values. So it kind of depends who you're talking to, but generally, I mean, this absolutely has an economic impact, positive economic impact, which everyone cares about. So those are all important, but then other issues come into play, like, is it a safe use of taxpayer money? Does it come at someone else's expense? And so you spend a lot of time helping to allay those fears, those concerns, address those issues. But there's just so many benefits that I think a lot of legislators are interested in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. Here's a question from Joyce Bogosian. Hi, Joyce. I don't know why we're getting an echo. Hi, Joyce. I don't know why we're getting an echo. Will public banking funds be able to invest in renewable energy initiatives? I think we talked about that, and I think the answer is yes, but go ahead.
Yes. I mean, that's certainly, that would be a very viable type of loan. So yeah, absolutely, I would see that renewable energy being a real hot button for the public bank to get involved in.
Okay, great. So I think we can go back up and try to catch a couple of Matt's questions quickly before we close. One of them is, do we know how much the Wall Street banks are making off of New Mexico's money that they're holding?
I don't think we know how much they're making, but we that could be something that we researched. We know that at any one time there's anywhere from 3 to 8, I think currently it would be between $3 and $8 billion in Wall Street banks that are revenues from that have come into the state. So 50 million to start the bank and 60 million for an initial deposit of just moving that revenue from one bank, from one depository to another, isn't a big deal when you think about the size of the deposits that are sitting in the Wall Street banks, and that they are definitely using for their own money making. They're not just paying interest to the state, they're also, that's when it sits in that bank, they can use it to make money for themselves too.
Okay, another question of Matt's, we may have answered this, and he's asking, does the North Dakota State Bank only loan through other banks or credit unions? And why do we have to go through privately owned for-profit banks, even if they're community banks? And I think it's, you know, we don't want to compete with that. Is that the main reason?
Right. But governmental entities, as it's written in the legislation, could go directly to the bank. And that could be cities, counties, or other governmental entities.
Oh, so it'd only be private business owners and people like that that would have to go to the community banks. Okay, but otherwise the state public bank can lend money for state infrastructure and state projects and
for state projects too.
County and city projects as well. Yeah, okay, great. Well, I think we probably need to wrap it up because we have just a couple minutes. We got to most of the questions, and I think, Angela, you were maybe able to answer a couple of Matt's questions by typing in the answers. So are we ready to wrap up?
I want to just wrap up for a second. I think we heard tonight about a proven public policy that makes a great deal of sense, but it is opposed by the banking industry. This is a theme in the New Mexico legislature, and I suspect many other state legislatures. Policies that will benefit constituents runs headlong into industry-inspired misinformation campaigns as they see some threat of reduced profit. You see it every time in hearings when the chambers of commerce come and like the sky is falling if you have to give sick leave to an employee or something. Every good idea needs a strong, well-informed constituent advocacy to overcome industry's lobbying. And so I ask each of you to take what you've learned and contact your legislators and ask for a conversation. We need the Democratic Senate and House caucuses to positively buzz with informed constituent pleas. We need to remind legislators that we contributed, called, and canvassed for Democrats for a reason, to pass bills like this. Retake will work with AFLEP to develop language that can be used in letters to the editor and op-eds. We need to own the information highway and public banking. Let's do that.
So as Angela mentioned earlier, you can go to aflep.org and get information there, but also at retakeourdemocracy.org, we will be keeping you informed and giving you talking points. And then when we get into the session, we will specifically let you know when the bill's being heard and who to talk to and all of that. But go to retakeourdemocracy.org and subscribe to the blog, and also sign up for our legislative alerts if you want to be kept informed. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. We lost Representative Trujillo again, but thank you, Senator Steinborn. Thank you, Elga Garcia Garza, Angela Merkert, Harold Dixon. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our attendees tonight. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned a lot. You can always contact AFLEP or contact Retake if you have other questions. You can reach us by email at retakeresponse@gmail.com.
And our next up will be a zoominar on public power in New Mexico, and that coalition's plan to introduce local choice energy in the 2023 legislative session. The date is not set yet, but with the holidays during Thanksgiving, and we're going to be out of town for a couple of weeks or for a week. So it'll probably be sometime in early December. But local choice energy is very similar with this. It's like allowing local jurisdictions to own their own energy instead of having it owned by, you know, the P&Ms and the IOUs of the world, investor-owned utilities.
Right.
So stick around for that. And then we'd be remiss if we also didn't mention that it's election time and it's early voting. So please vote if you haven't voted already, and urge your friends to vote and encourage them to have a plan to vote, and keep in touch with them and make sure they actually vote. And actually in the blog that we produced today, we have ways in which you can be involved in the Senate race in Georgia, the Senate race in Pennsylvania, and with Gabe Vasquez here in New Mexico.
That's CD.
That's CD2. So we got to stick with it, because if we don't hold the House and the Senate in Washington, it's going to be a brutal 2 years. So let's do our part. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Roxanne and Paul.
We'll be back soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.